Hey everyone, it's Megan and I'm back with another mind-body nutrition tip for you. And I want to start this one off by saying if I had one wish for us and our culture when it comes to food would be to stop making food our enemy and stop making appetite our enemy. So today we're going to be talking about nourishment and pleasure and how that can play a big role in your relationship and experience with food. So, nourishment we'll start with, and we can have different definitions or thoughts about what nourishment means. The way I'm going to use it is it's more than just the nutrition or the nutritional value of your food. And it includes that, but it also includes more of the experience and how you're experiencing your meal. Um, Kind of like having that warm, fuzzy feeling that you feel like it's something that's actually nourishing you, and not just on a nutritional level, but on a whole body, mind, emotional level. So that means you could even be having food that's traditionally not considered the healthiest, but you're having it in an environment and maybe with company that you really like, a great conversation, a nice cozy atmosphere, and you're slowly enjoying and savoring. You're not worried or not feeling guilt or anything like that. You're just eating to your satisfaction. And that can also be a very nourishing meal, even if there's not that much nutrition in the meal. And that's really important because when we experience that nourishing feeling, we relax. So think about a time you've had that experience with food. You're just relaxed, like you're feeling there's no tension there, right? And if you've seen my other nutrition tips, you should know now that stress, when we eat in a stressed state, our body and our digestion basically shuts down. It doesn't fully digest our food, and it doesn't help our metabolism at all. And it can help make our body store fat and lose muscle. So when you're in a relaxed state, which nourishment does for us, we're able to better metabolize, better burn calories, um, and just digest all the nutrients that we can get from our meal. So that's a big reason why it's important to really think about how we can bring more nourishment into our food and our meals. So an experience that comes to mind for me, or an example I can think of right away, is actually with wine. And I went on this trip to the San Francisco area, Sonoma Valley, and wine country, and we went to all these different wineries, which was amazing. And one in particular we went to, it was a castle, and it was like we got like a tour of the castle. It had, that atmosphere of the dark and dim, but it was very historic. And um, we went to the wine cellar, and I loved, just the smell of the wine cellar and just that atmosphere. Plus the stories, the tour guide was telling us all the stories and history behind the wines, behind the castle. So then we went in for a tasting, and we had a whole bunch of different wines, and which was, tasted just divine. And I bought a bottle or two, and later, at home, I think I was with my sister at the time. We might have been watching a movie or something, and we weren't really connecting that much, but we took out the bottle of wine, had that, and it tasted so different. Like, it just didn't taste as good because we weren't in that whole experience and atmosphere. And it's amazing how your body just interprets it so differently just based on your surroundings and how you're feeling. So that example comes to mind for me. But think about, for you, was there a time where you had the same food but in a totally different environment, and it was just a totally different experience and may have tasted completely different? So that is kind of what I think about when we think of nourishment. And now nourishment doesn't even have to just come from food. It can come from good company. It can come from just feeling good in your body, whatever that experience is. It can come from nature. So a good exercise to do is think about all of the things that actually feel like they're nourishing you, mind, body, or soul. It could be anything. And start to do and add in more of those things, because overall that's going to help your physiology. It's going to help your metabolism. It's going to help your health, because it's really healing. And our body heals when we're in the relaxed state, not in the stress state. So yeah, just think about that in your life. And along those same lines, pleasure is very similar. And pleasure also relaxes us and gets us into our body. But a lot of people have this weird relationship with pleasure. We have that term guilty pleasure, because we often feel like if we're experiencing pleasure, we're doing something wrong, or we're feeling guilty, maybe because we feel like we don't deserve it, or it could be from kind of the religious background of feeling pleasure it's more of a thing to be guilty for. So it's interesting in our culture how we perceive pleasure, because we love it, but we hate it oftentimes. So that's just something to think about, because when we have that in the back of our mind, like maybe you're enjoying a really delicious piece of chocolate or cake and it's pleasurable, but it may also trigger guilt, which automatically takes you out of that relaxation state, and all of a sudden it's not fully pleasurable anymore, because you're having those feelings, negative feelings. And so that is the part that gets really tricky, especially when we're, in a diet culture, and kind of a perfectionist culture where everything, you feel like you have to eat perfectly or clean. And it's almost like a moral thing where we feel like, oh, if we're eating perfectly, then we are perfect and we are good. And if we're not, then we are somehow like sinning, or we're bad people. So we have to disconnect those things. And only then can we really have true pleasure and true relaxation and true metabolism that's the healthiest for us. So try to start noticing if you have those thoughts or feelings come up if you're having something pleasurable. And it doesn't even have to be with food. Like often if you feel that way about food, you feel that way about other pleasures in your life. So try and just make that connection first, and you don't have to change it right away. Just notice it and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Just starting to like pay attention to that can help. Another thing, pleasure, when we're actually fully experiencing pleasure without that guilt, it actually regulates our metabolism and our appetite. I meant to say appetite. Yeah, it regulates both, but it regulates our appetite, because if the body isn't fully experiencing that pleasure, it's not satisfied, because we're built to avoid pain and seek pleasure. That's what we want. So when you're not allowing yourself that, then your body just gets hungry for it. So you're going to be seeking out more, but you're never going to truly feel satisfied. So if you do want to help, if you feel like, oh my God, my appetite's out of control, I just feel like I can't get enough, then really look at your relationship to pleasure when it comes to food, and if you have that guilt that's hanging over yourself. So when it comes to pleasure, though, another thing is that sometimes it can be overdone, right? We need a balance in all things. So you want to let it in, but also just use it wisely and just be aware, because we do need a balance and moderation. So it doesn't mean, eating all the sweets all the time because they're pleasurable, but making sure that it is included in part of your overall balance that we talked about in some other videos. So another thing you can do when it comes to pleasure, if you're not sure if you are letting it in, is to make a list, a pleasure inventory of everything, foods, all your favorite foods that you think give you pleasure, or you want to give pleasure without that guilty feeling, but also other experiences and things that really give you pleasure. And take a look at the list. It could be people, places, things, and then go through and check off like how many do you actually allow, and how often do you actually do those things that give you pleasure. And if it's not very often, start to pick one or two and just include it a little bit more. Maybe it's daily, maybe if it's something small, maybe it's weekly, monthly, but to see if you can add in a little more of that pleasure and try and watch the guilt. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.